Ocean ecosystems. From the sunlit surface to the endless abyss, the sea is a living architecture of predators, giants, coral cities, darkness, polar adaptation, and a fragile blue heartbeat now under threat. The ocean is not a single environment. It is a layered living system that changes with depth, light, pressure, temperature, and food. The source file frames the sea as a world of structure rather than emptiness, and that is the right way to begin. From the bright upper waters to the abyss, every layer of the ocean imposes different rules on survival. Some zones reward speed and intelligence. Others reward patience, camouflage, or cooperation. Far below, where sunlight never reaches, life must reinvent itself around chemistry, pressure, and darkness. Seen this way, the ocean becomes less like scenery and more like a complete planetary architecture of life. This opening matters because it prepares the viewer to stop thinking of the sea as a blue surface. The surface is only the visible skin of a much larger system. Below it lies a hierarchy of predators, migrations, coral cities, deep biological invention, and extreme polar adaptations. Each zone is linked to the others. Energy moves upward from microscopic producers. Nutrients circulate between depth and surface. Predators regulate populations. Giant animals redistribute fertility through the water column. Even the most remote abyss remains connected to the life of the upper sea. The documentary should therefore open with a feeling of descent. We begin in the familiar image of open water, but quickly reveal that this world contains many worlds. The ocean is a battlefield of intelligence and muscle, a refuge for the largest animals in Earth's history, a cradle of cooperation and symbiosis, and a place where darkness has forced life to become stranger than land-based imagination usually allows. It is also one of the most threatened systems on the planet. That tension between wonder and vulnerability should define the entire film. To enter the ocean, then, is to enter a living order of layers. Each layer has its own law. Each species occupies a role. And every form of life, from drifting plankton to the largest whale, belongs to a structure whose complexity is still beyond complete human understanding. At the upper levels of this structure stand the apex predators, and the source file makes clear that they embody both strength and intelligence. Orcas are the most powerful example. They are the largest dolphins in the world, reaching about 8 to 10 meters in length and weighing around 8 tons. Yet their greatness does not lie in size alone. It lies in social intelligence. Orcas hunt through coordinated group behavior so refined that it often looks strategic rather than instinctive. To attack humpback whales, they divide roles within the group and use force in sequence. To capture seals resting on ice, they create waves together to wash the prey into the water. Their power is collective. The file also emphasizes a more unsettling detail. Orcas know how to attack the weakness of great white sharks, triggering tonic immobility in order to take the nutrient-rich liver. That fact changes the viewer's understanding of the oceanic hierarchy. The top of the food chain is not ruled simply by the hardest bite or the fastest body. It is ruled by precision, learning, and cooperation. Orcas are apex predators because they combine social structure with predatory skill. Their emotional life deepens the story further. Orcas live in lifelong family units, and each pod can have its own dialect. The source material includes one of the most heartbreaking examples in marine behaviour: a mother carrying the dead body of her calf for 17 days across a journey of 16,000 kilometres. This belongs in the film because it forces the audience to see that intelligence in the sea is never only tactical. It can also be social, cultural, and deeply emotional. Alongside the orca stands the great white shark, a biological design refined across more than 400 million years. The great white's ampullae of Lorenzini allow it to detect extremely weak electrical pulses, including the heartbeat of prey in darkness. Its warm-blooded physiology supports speed and reflex, even in cold water. It can reach about 56 kilometres per hour, and its breaching strike from below can hit with explosive force at around 40 kilometres per hour. The great white is not just a fear symbol, it is an evolutionary masterpiece. The file then broadens the picture through other predators: tiger sharks as omnivorous cleaners of the sea, hammerheads with their widened sensory platform, and moray eels with their second pharyngeal jaw, even capable of cooperative hunting with groupers. Together, these animals prove that the ocean's upper predators do not share one single design. They represent a library of evolutionary strategies written for ambush, speed, perception, cooperation, and endurance. If predators show the ocean at its sharpest, the great whales show it at its largest. The sea remains the only environment on Earth capable of supporting animals of such enormous scale. And the source file uses them not just as marvels of size, but as central ecological actors. The blue whale is the clearest example. At around 30 metres in length and more than 200 tonnes in mass, it is the largest animal known to have ever lived. Its heart is as large as a car. Its tongue can weigh as much as an elephant. But the documentary should go beyond shock at size. The real significance of the blue whale lies in what it does within the system. Through the process often called the whale pump, blue whales move nutrients such as iron and nitrogen from depth toward the surface, fertilizing phytoplankton. Those microscopic producers help generate about 50% of the oxygen on Earth. In addition, a single blue whale can store an amount of carbon comparable to 30,000 mature trees. That means the largest animal on the planet is also a climate actor. It does not merely inhabit the ocean. It helps regulate one of the biological engines on which the atmosphere depends. Its sound belongs in the film as well. The blue whale's calls can reach about 188 decibels and carry across distances greater than 16 kilometres. In cinematic terms, this transforms the ocean from a visual space into an acoustic one. The sea is not silent below the surface. It is filled with signals, calls, echoes, and distances measured not only in miles, but in sound travelling through water. Humpback whales add another dimension. The file calls them artists of the ocean, and the description is fitting. Male humpbacks sing complex songs that can last around 20 minutes. The songs change over time and spread across great distances. Yet even in these apparently lyrical animals, behaviour and survival remain intertwined. Their bubble net hunting technique is one of the most extraordinary coordinated feeding strategies in nature. A group releases bubbles in a rising spiral to trap small fish inside a living prison of air before lunging upward together. Migration enlarges the grandeur further. Humpbacks can travel around 8,000 kilometres between polar feeding grounds and warmer breeding waters. This makes them not only giants, but travellers linking distant marine worlds into one continuous rhythm. The documentary should let this create a sense of scale different from the abyss. Horizontal scale, the long breathing movement of giant bodies across the whole ocean. At first glance, coral reefs seem almost too colourful to belong in the same documentary as great predators and abyssal darkness. Yet the source file places them exactly where they belong, at the centre of one of the most complex and productive urban systems in the ocean. Coral reefs occupy only about 1% of the seafloor, yet they shelter around 25% of all marine species. That imbalance is astonishing. It means reefs are not just habitats. They are concentrated living cities. The relationship between clownfish and sea anemones is one of the most elegant expressions of that city-like complexity. The clownfish carries a special mucus coating that protects it from the anemone's stinging cells. In return, it defends the anemone from butterfly fish. Shelter and defense become mutual. Even more remarkable, clownfish can change sex from male to female in order to preserve the social structure of the group. The reef is therefore not just colourful. It is full of biological negotiation and adaptive social order. Cleaner shrimp expand this sense of social architecture further. The file describes them as doctors operating service stations where larger fish, even predators, line up to have parasites removed. This image is powerful because it reveals the reef as a place where roles emerge beyond predator and prey. Maintenance, cooperation, signalling, and temporary trust all become part of the ecosystem. Sea turtles, especially green turtles, deepen the reef story by linking coral to adjacent habitats such as seagrass meadows. According to the source, seagrass can absorb carbon 35 times more efficiently than tropical forests. Turtles help regenerate these meadows and also help control sponge populations that might otherwise damage coral communities. This means the reef is sustained not only by what lives within it, but also by larger mobile animals that maintain balance across connected habitats. The documentary should treat reefs as marine cities that never sleep. Every surface is occupied. Every opening contains negotiation. Every species is part of a dense living traffic system of cleaning, feeding, hiding, defending, reproducing, and adapting. When the viewer sees the reef this way, it stops being only a place of beauty. It becomes one of the most sophisticated ecological concentrations on Earth. Below the sunlit surface begins another ocean entirely. As depth increases, pressure multiplies, temperature falls toward freezing, and the logic of life changes. The source file notes that pressure in the deepest parts can become around 500 times greater than at the surface. In such a world, survival demands radical invention. Bioluminescence is one of the defining responses. Through chemical reactions between luciferin and oxygen, deep-sea organisms generate light for hunting, signalling, camouflage, or defense. This is a crucial moment in the film because it shows that in a realm without sunlight, life manufactures its own illumination. Darkness in the deep ocean is therefore not empty. It is alive with coded flashes and glows. Sperm whales extend the drama of the deep. The file presents them as descending thousands of meters to hunt giant squid, using the most powerful natural sonar known. around 236 decibels. This means that even in the deep, where strange smaller creatures dominate popular imagination, giant mammals still enter the abyss as hunters. The deep ocean is not cut off from the upper world. It is visited by powerful bodies carrying the sensory technologies of sound into darkness. Then come the hydrothermal vents, among the most revolutionary environments in all biology. At around 2,500 meters, where fluids can reach 400 degrees Celsius, life no longer depends on sunlight. It depends on chemosynthesis. Blind shrimp, yeti crabs and giant tube worms cluster around these vents in communities powered by chemistry rather than photosynthesis. This breaks one of the oldest intuitions humans have about life, that sunlight is always the ultimate basis of complex ecosystems. In the deep ocean, Earth's internal chemistry becomes the engine of food webs. The deep sea should therefore feel more than strange. It should feel transformative. It changes what the audience thinks life is capable of. It proves that the ocean is not only deeper than expected, but biologically stranger and more inventive than ordinary imagination allows. At the poles, the ocean becomes a world of cold light, drifting ice, and animals adapted to sensory uncertainty. The source file highlights belugas and narwhals as species built for frozen conditions. In dark, ice-choked waters, sound becomes essential. These animals navigate through acoustic perception. The narwhal's long tusk, far from being merely decorative, is actually a tooth packed with sensory nerves. In the film, this should feel like another example of the ocean's ability to transform anatomy into environmental intelligence. The polar food chain becomes even more fragile through dependence. Polar bears dominate on the ice, but they rely completely on seals to build the fat necessary for survival. This dependence matters because it reveals how tightly coupled the frozen system is. A shift in ice affects seals. A shift in seals affects bears. The farther north or south the system goes, the narrower the margin of disruption can become. One of the most intriguing examples in the file is the so-called naluga, a hybrid between beluga and narwhal. This is not just biological curiosity. It is presented as a sign that environmental change is beginning to disturb the old boundaries between species. When habitats shift, distributions overlap in new ways, and the structure of the ecosystem itself begins to loosen. That gives the polar sections of the documentary a subtle unease. These animals are not just beautifully adapted. They are living at the edges of systems now being rearranged. The ocean at the poles should therefore be shown as a frontier of specialized survival and emerging instability. Sound replaces sight. Fat replaces flexibility. Ice becomes habitat, hunting platform, barrier and threat all at once. The audience should feel that the polar sea is one of the purest examples of how tightly life can be fitted to a specific environment and how vulnerable that life becomes when the environment begins to change. Seen from the perspective of depth, the ocean is less like a place and more like a vertical civilization. Near the surface, sunlight fuels plankton blooms and schooling fish. In the middle waters, light thins and predators begin to rely more on stealth, burst speed and sensory specialization. In the deep, chemistry replaces sunlight and bodies become instruments of survival in cold, pressure and darkness. This layered structure is one of the most important ideas in the source file, even when it is spread across separate examples. The documentary should gather those examples into one larger realization. The sea is organized by depth. That organization matters because it creates continuity between worlds that might otherwise seem disconnected. The orca and the blue whale belong to the upper ocean, but their lives still depend on microscopic producers below the scale of ordinary perception. Coral reefs flourish in light, but deep hydrothermal ecosystems flourish without any sunlight at all. Belugas and narwhals navigate the polar ocean through sound, while sperm whales descend into darkness using sonar, more powerful than any natural system on Earth. Each adaptation belongs to a specific level in the ocean's layered architecture, and yet each level still depends on movements of energy, nutrients, and chemistry that cross boundaries. For the viewer, this should create a sense of descent through systems rather than a collection of unrelated marvels. The ocean becomes a building of life with many floors. Some are bright, crowded, and social. Some are lonely, cold, and almost lightless. Some are explosive with predatory motion. Others appear still until a glow or pulse of sound reveals hidden activity. Together, they form a single living order, stretching from the surface down into abyssal depth. This section gives the documentary a unifying structure. It says that the sea is not simply full of creatures. It is full of layers, and those layers are among the deepest organizing principles of life on Earth. After wonder must come responsibility. The source file closes with a direct environmental warning, and the documentary should do the same. The ocean's magnificence does not protect it from damage. In some ways, its scale hides the damage until it becomes severe. Plastic pollution is one of the most visible signs. Around 11 million tons of plastic enter the ocean every year, with projections that the number could triple by 2040. More than 50% of sea turtles have already ingested plastic, often mistaking it for jellyfish. This must be stated with clarity because it turns a familiar human material into a lethal ecological trap. Climate change adds a broader, destabilizing force. Warmer seas trigger coral bleaching and threaten the collapse of reef ecosystems. Rising temperature also affects the sex ratios of turtle hatchlings in nesting sites. In other words, climate pressure is not only changing habitat, it is interfering with reproduction itself. Overexploitation has left some of the ocean's giants profoundly reduced. Industrial whaling in the 20th century devastated blue whale populations, which the file states now remain at only around 10,000 to 25,000 individuals. Deep-sea mining threatens hydrothermal vent systems, those chemical oases that may preserve clues about the earliest history of life on Earth. The documentary should make clear that the ocean is not an inexhaustible void. It is a structured living system now under layered pressure. Pollution, warming, extraction, and noise all move through that structure. The result is not abstract. It is visible in turtles, reefs, whales, vents, and fisheries. Yet the source file also offers a constructive closing. Only about 10% of the ocean is currently protected, with a target of 30% by 2030. Small actions, reducing single-use plastic, supporting sustainable fishing, and lowering carbon emissions may seem minor when measured against the size of the sea. but they belong to the logic of cumulative change. The film should therefore end not in despair, but in responsibility. The blue heartbeat of the planet is still alive, but it is asking to be treated not as an infinite resource, but as a living world worthy of protection. In the end, the ocean must be understood as both wonder and warning. It contains intelligence, power, beauty, cooperation, darkness, and forms of life stranger than imagination. But it also reveals how quickly even the greatest living systems can be stressed when human pressure becomes planetary in scale. The sea does not need our admiration alone. It needs restraint, understanding, and protection. From the sunlit surface to the endless abyss, the ocean remains one of the most complete expressions of life on Earth, and one of the clearest tests of whether humanity can learn to live inside a system without destroying the balance that makes that system possible.